Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another Path of Exile 2 video, and in this one I'm going to talk about my starter build and kind of like how hard, well maybe not so much my starter build, I guess kind of, but it's more about how hard the nerfs actually hit minions. And you know, the patch notes was a huge nerf to basically everything. It was an absolute fucking disaster. However, I feel like minions were hit the least out of the high performing builds, at least from my perspective. So I want to talk about the changes to this and what's happening going forward. First and foremost, I do want to give a little shout out if I can get the pages up. Here we go. We have Path of Exile 2. Written guides are now going to be posted on Icyvein's PoE-vault.com/PoE2. A link for this will be in the description down below. However, we had to basically take away all of our guides because we have no idea if they're going to be working or not by tomorrow when this launches, because on Friday, we're basically going to be playing a completely new game. However, leveling guides, we should be able to get something out. Hopefully, we'll have access to skill tree before the launch. At least that's what I'm hoping for, but we still don't know the 100+ support gems. We still don't know the 100+ new unique items. And there's so many things that we don't know. So instead of build guides, I think it was Ciceron who said build guesses. I think that's a pretty good description of what we're about to do. However, I feel like we have a pretty good state of an educated guess to what we can expect for things. So I'm going to talk about what I'm expecting to see from the Witches entities. We're talking about both Infernalist and the Lich, and I'll also reference what I think is going to be the better of the two. And we're going to talk about the Titan, we're going to talk about the Smith of Kitava, and on the south side of the tree, we have the Tactician, which I'm very confident is going to be pretty cool, as well as the Gemlin Legionnaire. So I'm going to start with the Witches, because that's what most people are here for. Essentially, the way I think we're going to be playing is very similar to what we've done before. It's going to be like a hybrid approach. We start with the witch leveling with things like chaos-oriented spells, where we focus on that in the early stage till we get access to SRS. And then I think that we will still enable chaos skills together with the gas arrows from the skeletal sniper. We'll probably put a last gas support on the skeletal snipers, keep them alive so we get that skill out, which will ignite with flame wall. And that's kind of like the general consensus of what we're going to use. Once we get SRS, however, flame wall is not a good choice. Now we're going to want to have scattershot support on Ember Fusillade so that we can provide as many projectiles as possible to summon, well, not 3, but 2 per orb, I guess, per cast. But we're going to be doing that and maybe even fast forward support on the Ember Fusillade. So that's going to be the kind of approach that we're leveling with. And then, as per usual, that's going to be the play style all the way up till we get to the point of Act 3 Asakibog Witch. Once we kill that, we can fully transition smoothly into minion build. There are ways of making this faster, but I believe that this approach is the one that provides the smoothest transition for people to follow a build guide in. So that's what we're going to be going for, and very likely something like that I'll be playing. I think that's very comfortable to play. Once you're done with the campaign, you start early endgame mapping. I think that for both Lich and Infernalist, the kind of playstyle approach is going to be gated around the idea of playing with the hybrid life and energy shield together with block being the background defenses. So we would not have these nodes. We wouldn't have these nodes, not these nodes either, or these nodes. It would be something in the ballpark of this. Might not do those either, actually. My bad. Or that one, or this one. We might even do it like this. So this is kind of approach to the skill tree in general that we'd be expecting to play. Early on with Chaos, we'd actually be taking these nodes, and we'd also be grabbing these nodes, which we take away when we transition into a full summoner build in general. However, this is the generic kind of approach to tree that I expect to be very similar or in the ballpark of what we're going to be expected to see come launch. Might not do those two energy shield, actually, my bad. So this is basically it, and after this, you'll get some energy shield nodes. So essentially, what we're doing is playing life-based with energy shield covering us, and then we have layered that with block not modifiers. I don't think we need to have that one either, sorry. So this is basically the general consensus of the approach of the tree. And there's a few other things you can add to this. For example, we want to grab Necrotic Touch for crit strike chance. These nodes, we can go in for this as well if you want to. So there's a couple of variations to this. But obviously, I just want to talk about the baseline of it. During the campaign, you'll land on something like this. And the idea is for you to wear a shield for block chance, preferably with increased chance to block. But it's just about getting your proper defensive layer that's covering the hybrid approach of energy shield and life. And I feel like this is going to be pretty similar to what we see on most witch builds leveling up. However, once you start gearing, I think that the transition for this will be to actually cut this part of the tree as we're going to have a more of a focus into the dexterity part instead of strength nowadays. We'll need a little bit of strength for some support gems, but the idea is to cut the tree off around here. Maybe we'll skip this traveling and have that from other sources. I don't know how the optimal tree will be because we don't know how the new tree will look, since the Lich specifically will want presence aura or presence radiance nodes. We don't know where those are going to be, and we're going to want those. So I'll just show you some generic approaches of what I'm expecting to see, and that is obviously going into the dexterity part. And with the dexterity in mind, we're talking about evasion bases. Now we want energy shield layered by evasion, which works with an entropy system. I'm not going to go too in depth with how that works. Essentially, we're going to cover ourselves with that. But now we're open up a couple of other cool features, such as Ghost Shroud, which is just replacing Grim Feast. But we're also enabling things like Wind Dancer, which Wind Dancers will require the resonance to be functioning properly. We also can get these nodes over here, which is 1+ maximum energy shield per 12 evasions. Now we can use full evasion pieces with these evasion and energy shield hybrid items or modifiers. This also allows us to pick up Eternal Youth, that now allows us our life flask to cover our energy shield. And this is something that is very popular I think it's going to be very popular to be used for the Lich, as we can now utilize our flask to cover energy shield. We have Ghost Shroud, Wind Dancer, all of these things layering us with defensive layers that is similar to block, but it's an entropy system. But most importantly, this opens up that offhand weapons or shield slot, because now we no longer have to wear a shield. You could wear a shield and have shield blocking as well, but you also have the opportunity now to use a trench timber for more damage output. You can have a focus. You can have like more evasion. You can have more energy shield. There's so many options that opens up, which I think is going to be very good leading into the approach of the game. With the fact that we now have tamed beasts around the corner, we have 100+ unique items around the corner, we have 100+ support gems around the corner. We just don't know. So I think this opens up for a better approach in terms of options that we can play with. So I think this is going to be what we're going to see more and more for endgame play with minion-oriented builds, at least for the Witch in this case. This also does allow us to already be focused on some dexterity investments to be utilizing our gear, which further goes down to the fact that if it turns out that we can get something like a haste aura being the most sought after modifier from a tamed beast, we're not that far off to get enough dexterity to be able to use that skill gem. So if we can get that and that spirit cost isn't too crazy, then we should be able to squeeze that into a build like this. And that's what I think we're going to see on both Infernalist and the Lich. Now, the question comes down to which one is best. And the answer is, I don't fucking know. Like, I don't know. No one knows. We're all just guessing here. My educated guess would be the following. This node here is buffed to 50%. If you decide to play around with Infernalist in a Infernal Flame balancing state, which I don't think is going to be too hard to do, you should be able to squeeze out more damage than the Lich from the Infernalist, on top of the fact that you do get some spirits. Not too crazy, but I think that you can get pretty crazy damage numbers from the Infernalist, which is actually going to be better damage, especially with the spirit nerfs, which I'll talk about in a bit, compared to the Lich. However, you lose a lot of defenses. Tons of defensive layers gone from the Infernalist. And I'm not confident if I want to play around with the whole Infernal Flame balance approach. So if you don't do the Infernal Flame balance, I feel like you're going to end up doing less damage than the Lich on the Infernalist. But it all depends on the spirits. We estimated a proper endgame character, not min-max super endgame gear, but a proper endgame character that beats all the content should be around 400, give or take, spirits. That obviously means that this node right here, with those numbers, should be a ballpark of value between 60 and 75, maybe 80 spirit, depending on how much life you have in your gear. And that's the equivalent of about 3 minions. If it's lower, it's about 2, but let's say 3 minions. And because it's 3 minions, it's very close to the scaling efficiency you get from the Lich presence modifier. Do keep in mind that if you do decide to do Seething Body, which is a lot of damage, that's also within presence, which means that wherever the hell they place the presence aura nodes on the tree, you're going to want to grab those. On the other hand, if we do decide to go for the Lich, we have a few other things that's happening. First and foremost, we do get the Necromantic Conduit for the extra Unholy Bite with extra damage. Very, very good. And we have quite a few options, but what I think is going to be the play is to get a Necromantic Conduit and then grab Crystalline Phylactery as the last modifier. But Crystalline Phylactery gives us that extra jewel, and since they are removing 12 jewel sockets from the skill tree, and Minion scales very, very, very well from jewel sockets, that it does increase the efficiency that the Lich brings to the table to be competitive damage-wise with the Infernalist. But what the Lich does that the Infernalist does not is provide you with really good defensive layers, such as Soulless Form Eternal Life combination, where 10% of your damage that you take is bypassing your energy shield, and Eternal Life just makes that damage go away, combined with things like a Serious Disdain, for example. And all of these things allows you to have a damage that is competitive despite not getting those 60 to 80 spirits that you get from the Infernalist, and still be competitive with the dual socket in comparison. So I think the Lich is still going to be the superior minion choice, in my opinion. However, do keep in mind that you do want to have no inherent mana regen here. You're going to want to have enough life to make sure you have enough mana regen to cover your spell cast, which is burning with the Necromantic Conduit. So there's going to be a little balance act there to see how you're going to play around with that. But that's what I think is going to happen. That's my take on the topic of Lich versus Infernalist. When it comes to the Warrior, I don't think there were any notable changes from the patch notes whatsoever on this side of the tree that is going to affect us. I think that both Titan minion build as well as Smith of Kitava minion build is going to be extremely similar. It's basically going to be strength stacking beyond the gem requirements, of course. Life stacking and block focus. They're going to be very, very straightforward, very easy to understand, and very straightforward in general to both play and operate. But I don't think that they can compete with Evasion Energy Shield Witch play. I think the Smith of Kitava is probably the easiest. You don't get enough damage sources to compete with the Witch Ascendancies, neither of them. But I do believe that the defensive layer from the Smith of Kitava is the only one that can be competitive with the defensive layers. But most importantly, you're able to get those defensive layers without any investments, because it's basically for free. And I see chats asking about Lich PUB when. There will not be any PUBs in this video. I don't have access to anything unless GGG provides us with a skill tree. Then at least we can give you that. But since they're not going to give us the 100 plus support gems, the 100 plus uniques, I am completely unable to give you a full-blown guide or a full-blown PUB. But if they give us a skill tree, I'll throw something together so you have something to go by. However, when it comes to the topic of the Gemlin Legionnaire, there was some changes to that. The stat stacking has been quite severely nerfed. Tactician has some pretty cool things, such as this note right here. I'm in the way, actually, but it says the solid plan, persistent buffs have 50% less reservation. This allows us to have an easier time to fit in things like Blink, Wind Dancer, Ghost Shroud, and that allows us to have a little easier access, which then means that we have more minions as a result of having these things. And we're in a position of the skill tree that is very attractive down here, because what we can do is this. We can pick up nodes such as these nodes here, which is just cooldown recovery. There's some more here on the right-hand side as well. And this is how we play the Gemlin Legionnaire build. Shout out to Oscar for that, by the way. So what we do here is allows us to run something like Bones of Ullr boots, which I believe I have already here. No, I do not. So let me show you. I can't spell. There we go. Bones of Ullr, which makes undead minions have reduced reservation. This again furthers the pushing of us being able to have as many minions as possible, but with a very heavy push down on cooldown recovery for Blink, which, by the way, is labeled as a traveling skill, but it has been confirmed by GGG that it will still reserve spirit. It's just being labeled as a traveling skill. It will still reserve spirit. So you can use Bones of Ullr without this making your mobility complete dog shit, and that's something that's very important. And both the Tactician and the Gemlin Legionnaire will have access to these things, doing the whole walk around. The couple things that's being infected, obviously the 12 dual sockets that are being removed from the skill tree will surely impact the way we path this build. But both of those builds, I believe, should be going into the whole idea of intelligence, evasion. We're basically strength stacking on the Gemlin, by the way. But we're doing the Evasion Energy Shield approach on both of those builds, since they have access to those things for a cheaper investment than the other two class bases. But instead of going on the left-hand side to grab block and whatnot, I think that we would go on the right-hand side up to get the Eternal Youth and the whole side of this. I'm not sure, because we still need to see how the skill tree changes. But that's kind of like where I'm at when it comes to the nerfs that's hitting minion builds in general. If I had to guess which builds would perform the best, I think that a Lich Evasion Energy Shield high Endgame is one of the top performing builds that I would expect to see. I think that Tactician is a sleeper build that we might see some crazy shenanigans from. I think that Gemlin Legionnaire is going to be absolutely horrible to level with, just like before. But I do believe that it holds a pretty nice spot for Endgame because of how much you can actually stack of those values. And I do want to have a little reservation on the Smith of Kitava simply because you can get so much strength and still have the intelligence that you need with the Smith of Kitava, because all your suffixes can just be attributes since your resistances is almost entirely covered by itself. And I think that's a quite interesting approach, but it will come out. It will come out on a competitive position for defenses. I think that the Smith of Kitava will be behind in terms of damage output. But that's basically where I'm sitting at and my perspective on the current state of the patch notes, everything we've seen so far. It's basically just a guess. An educated guess, mind you, but I don't want to sit here and tell you play this, play that. I will be playing the Lich. I'll be playing a hybrid into a block life energy shield. Then I will transition that into evasion energy shield and Ghost Shroud, Wind Dancer, Eternal Youth. It's going to be fun. I'm very excited for that. And the main reason for that is that has the theoretical best approach for sustain, but we don't know this new support gems. There might be a lot of things changing, allowing other things to be better or worse. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Anyways, I hope this video was answering some of your questions at least. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more content. I'd appreciate that. And don't forget to leave a comment. It really does help the channel's algorithm out. I do appreciate that. So thank you for that. I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe and keep rocking.